I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby here with Alex Edelman, whose stand-up special just for us is now available on HBO Max. I'd like to start off by asking Alex, like this stand-up special, you tell the tale of covertly attending a white nationalist meeting.
Mhm.
Where do you find humor from an environment of hatred?
Um, I think comedy comes from tension, and the more build and the more release there is, the more satisfying it can be, the more interesting it can be. And I also think that comedy stems from surprise, and so the surprise of an environment like that, I think, has a natural tendency towards comedy.
You actually say in the special that like empathy is like a North Star for Jewish people. How important
Mhm.
is like empathy for comics? How important is empathy?
I think there's a great deal of empathy engendered in the act of stand-up comedy, right? Like you know, the context of comedy is that one person stands up and an entire audience listens to a point of view. And that point of view may not be the same point of view that they have, or it may not be the thing they're sympathetic towards, but they sit there and quietly tolerate it and listen as somebody expresses themselves. And that is already a very empathetic act. And so I think empathy lends itself well to comedy and vice versa. And I also think comedians often refer to this idea of punching down, which can be like, sometimes clumsily applied, but there is an element of truth to that. You want your comedy to wrap itself around a point of view that isn't always, commonly expressed or easily expressed. And I think a great deal of that has to do with empathy.
Is there a bit of the special that you found the hardest to hone and just get right from that set?
Oh yeah, I mean the story at the center of it took forever, years to sort of batten down, and that's still the story of attending that meeting. There are so many issues with it. There are issues of because ultimately it's a narrative,
Mm.
and you know that narratives take so long to craft that that studios, when you're doing it for television, will take rooms and put rooms together to let you sit and think with 12 of the smartest and funniest people they can find as they try to put the narrative together. So that was really difficult, but rewarding to work on. And also the Christmas bit at the heart. There's a story about having Christmas for a friend of the family who wasn't Jewish, and that bit is like 12 minutes. And so getting all the ins and outs of that bit correct, I mean, it must be a slightly shorter in the special, but like getting all the ins and outs of that bit right with all the variations in tone and characters and physicality, it's like the most satisfying. It's the most satisfying bit of the special, but apart from the main narrative, maybe. But it took a long time to nail down.
Yeah, and you got stories within stories, which like it can
Yes.
be tricky because often with like stand up, you will have transition points. We're moving from one bit to the next bit, but then you got to loop back to where you were in the previous bit. So, how did you work on those transitions?
So the funny thing is, I stole that from Arabian Nights. I was reading Arabian Nights and I noticed that there's this thing called a frame narrative. I mean, I Googled it after. I was like, what is the storytelling process for Arabian Nights? And Mike Birbiglia was really helpful too. He said, no tangents on a tangent. Mike Birbiglia, who's another comedian, brilliant comedian, the executive producer of the special and the original producer of the show in New York, he's very big on no tangents on a tangent.
Okay.
So Birbiglia was helpful in keeping all those stories like in line with each other and never going off too digressively. And what he means by that is the main story at the spine is the star of it. And before every show, we'd write on a whiteboard 5 goals, and they were different every day. But I think out of the hundreds of times that we did the show, I would say probably like 90% of the time, one of the notes was the story as a star. Like you always have to keep that in mind when you're doing a show with an integrated narrative. So, yeah.
Now, like you say in the special that dumb jokes is your regular currency, and
Mhm.
for this special, you're delving into sort of ideas of white nationalism and race relations and all these sorts of things. So I would just like, though at the same time throughout there is lots of dumb, silly jokes and moments in it. So like I was sort of thinking, like, how would you describe like a dumb, benign, silly jokes and clever humor about sort of serious things? Do they work in harmony, or is there more in common with those than you might think at
Well,
first?
it takes a really smart person to look dumb. Like
Mm,
Steve Martin,
yeah.
he's been dumb in so many things, but you'd have to be an idiot to think that Steve Martin's an idiot, right?
Mm,
Like Steve Martin's a genius.
mm,
And so dumb jokes often take the best dumb jokes have a real intelligence to the center of them, right? Like the content is dumb, but the aesthetic is smart, or the aesthetic is smart, but the content is dumb, right? Like they're
mm,
dumb jokes have there's a beauty to them. And by the way, I'm an entertainer. Like the reason my show is a narrative is so that it keeps people hooked the entire time. My show's an 85-minute show, but you know, we did some testing with the show when it was in England. I got a bunch of people to watch a tape of it and guess how long it was. And the show was, 75 minutes at the time, but it felt like 48.
mm,
And so, like, it's because of a narrative can trick people.
mm,
And dumb jokes keep people's interest. If you're a comedy fan, dumb jokes keep your interest. If you're looking for a little more theater or narrative, then the story keeps your interest. So, like, it's a little bit cynical, actually, to the dumb jokes I start with at the top are to let people know that I can do a joke and that there's going to be a lot of jokes in a special, but also that there's going to be also high calorie content in terms of story. So it's a bit of a cynical trick to say that, but I love a dumb joke. I definitely do.
mm. Now, you say in the special that you sort of were under sort of the delusion maybe that you could have walked into this meeting. Once they meet you, you'd fix everything like about them.
Mm-hmm.
Which wasn't successful. But like, do you think?
Spoiler!
Oh, sorry.
Spoiler! No, we're all friends. They're coming to my seder tonight.
Oh my goodness.
No, no, they're not. They're not. They're not. They're not. Can you imagine? Can you imagine, Matt?
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. The next special can be about them all at
That'd
your.
be amazing. Look who's coming to seder.
Yeah. That's great. What about but like, do you think comedy can fix things? Do you think comedy can change the way people think about stuff?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, I think that's one of the best things about comedy. Comedy definitely gives people the option to. Comedy is so expansive, and when people are sitting there listening to you, they're inherently uh, inert to your perspective. There's a humanization process that happens over the course. I think, like, just to not add to the question that you asked earlier, but stand-up comedy live can actually be like a very human experience, right? Like it can really be, it's a real person-to-person thing. Even on television, it's a real person-to-person thing. Like the conceit of comedy that one person talks and everyone else listens. It's a really beautiful idea. Like there's a real generosity to being an audience member. There's generosity inherent in being a comedian. And so I think in that there is a real potential for communication, right? There's a real capacity for new idea,
Mm,
and I love it a lot. I've always thought it was a really, I always think it's really special thing, and I think you absolutely can change people with comedy. This show has been the most beautiful gift because after every show, I stand outside, I talk to anyone who wants to talk to me.
mm,
If they have the wherewithal and patience to ask a question, they do, and people, you know, I think the show is more about assimilation than it's about anti-Semitism. But people have tell me all the time that they walk away a little different than they came in, or in some cases a lot different. I've had like about a dozen interactions with people who told me that they thought of themselves as in some way not fans of Jews. And I was in Wales. This guy was hanging back after the show, and I was talking to him, and I realized I was like, "Hey, would you say that you're like?" Maybe like a bit of an anti-Semite. He's like, well, I'm not an anti-Semite. I just have some questions about why you guys have so much power, and like a really good conversation. And like, look, I've done 3 solo shows. I'm not. My work has never had this type of resonance before. So like, yeah, I absolutely comedy can change people, and one of the reasons this thing is so near and dear to me is because I've I've watched it happen, and I chalk that up to the people I've had conversations with. It's not
Yeah.
a solo endeavor. It's my directors, Adam Brace and Alex Timbers. It's Berbiglia. It's the many comedians and audience members who came and gave notes and criticism. It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and the special is dedicated to the memory of Adam Brace. What did he bring to the show?
So much. Um, Adam was my closest friend. We worked together for 11 years. He passed away like right before we started on Broadway. Um, yeah, I mean, I would not, I wouldn't, I don't know that I'd be a comedian without Adam. I think I'd be working in an office somewhere in sports marketing or something. Like, I, I, I loved him deeply and felt very seen by him. And he was able to sort of translate me. He would take the sort of like klutzy, neurodivergent parts of me and show me or provoke me uh, towards something that was communicable but still unique to me, which is what a great director and dramaturg should do. He always preferred directeur or dramaturg to director. He thought it was a more appropriate thing, but yeah, he was my closest collaborator for more than a decade, and I miss him terribly. I miss him terribly. It's
Yeah.
like I could speak for hours on it, and I also can, never say enough or quite capture it. Just frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 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 completely appreciate that. What what do you find funny? Like what makes something
Oh my
funny?
God. I love moments with that expose human foible. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like, have you seen the Larry Sanders Show?
Can you believe it?
Oh my God.
Or can you believe
The
that
Larry
Larry
Sanders
Sanders
Show.
show?
Larry Sanders Show. That's my favorite. That's my favorite of all the. That's my. I mean, like Larry Sanders Show is funny to me. I know you didn't ask what shows are funny to you, but like, oh, I just love. I love the weirdnesses. I love the strange. I love the strange things that you that find that show a little bit of a person behind something. Like it's just the best. It's a really special um, thing when you see like a joke that exposes something unexpected. And I love like hard left turns into something. Like I love a joke where like you never see the ending coming. So I guess like surprise, anything that surprises me, I think is so funny. And I also love watching someone like defend something indefensible in a way that's like really like I love transgression. I love like um which isn't to say like I love sort of comedians who are like cancel culture, but but yeah, I love transgression. I love surprise. I love human weakness, and I love like a silly dumb thing that's like surrealist for the sake of like surrealism. Like Chris Fleming, who has a special out, is like truly brilliant at this, and like uh, Brian Regan and Gary Gulman and Maria Bamford and Sarah Silverman. Like there's so many brilliant. Trevor Noah is really good at that stuff. Like it's. I love comedy, so I could go on.
Yeah. Coming into like when you went to the meeting that your story's
Mm-hmm.
all about in this special, like
Mm-hmm.
how much thought do you need to put in about how you spoke about the people and ideas that were there? Because in one sense, you seem to treat the people in that room with a maybe humanity they don't afford you, but at the same time, there are quite unacceptable ideas that you don't want to be wavering on.
Um, I mean, look, I think the show is sort of about the elasticity of empathy,
Mm,
and so I mean that's been something I think about a lot now. Like I went to the Time 100 gala last night because I was lucky enough to be one of the people on the list this year, and so in
yes,
Motaz Aziza,
congratulations.
thanks, man. And Motaz Aziza, who's a Palestinian photojournalist, was there too, and we had like a really thoughtful, warm, you know, conversation that was really like technicolor for me. And obviously, he and I probably disagree on a bunch of things, but also there are things that we probably agree. There are things that we definitely agree on, And so like I'm not comparing Motaz, who's a delightful, who's delightful in conversation, um, to anyone in this room, obviously. But you know, I think understanding where we end and others begin is truly what is truly one of the things that I think the special is about.
Mm.
And so like I don't know, compromising. Like I think that, and I think also that there's a question of like, what do you compromise? What is okay to compromise in terms of your personal values, things that you view as deal breakers, things that you view as essential to your humanity. Are you okay with putting some of those to the side for another person for a while, permanently? Like, what are those? You know, and at the same time, like we live in a very rancorous environment, right? So how do we move ourselves outside of that for something else? So like, and I guess in terms of like walking into a room like that, uh, all I'll say is that it raises a bunch of really interesting questions for me, and I think those questions, and like I think that's why the special for me felt interesting, and the show felt interesting, and why that experience, eventually, with prodding from other people who were like, "This is comedy. You have to be doing comedy about this." Like, because I didn't think about it right away as stand up. I was just like, "Here's a weird story I'll tell my friends."
Yeah.
Um, that's what I think is at the center of the show for me, is that.
Yeah, because you know, when you're dealing with sort of very racist views and ideas, it's like a very interesting environment to draw out these characters.
Mm.
And like it just when I was watching, I was reminded of this Thomas More quote. I think that was like, the devil cannot endure to be mocked,"
Sure, sure,
and sort of like finding the humor in the darkness, like and sort of making fun of the
sure.
of
But what if
yeah.
you met a
You come back.
racist who was okay with what if you met a racist who was okay? You know what? That's true. I do find that people with racist views are often not humorous about themselves. There's a quote that Stephen Fry likes to
Yeah.
occasionally cite, which is "Angels fly because they take themselves lightly."
Yeah.
And I think taking yourself lightly is like a really gorgeous human value. It's anyone who takes themselves lightly I can get along with.
Yeah.
Like no matter where they're from, if they take themselves lightly a little bit, they can, I really try to take myself lightly. So yeah.
There's a power in that, eh? Like,
Hmm.
like you sort of it's very disarming and it's very there's a real strength a lack of um doesn't have it's not an insecure thing to be able to
Hmm.
endure mockery and sort of self-deprecate. Yeah.
1,000%. And I think that yeah, you're right. There is a real security in like seeing yourself as someone who's also, because when I say human weakness is so funny, is that we all have weakness. And
Yeah.
there's something very authentic about like, it's very Christian, right? We're all sinners, but like, there's something very authentic in like addressing your weakness. And there's something very secure in like, in reckoning with it, right? Like it makes you a stronger person.
Yeah.
And I was working out with a friend of mine,
Mm.
and I was trying to lift a weight. He's like, push that weight away, push it away like it's someone close to you. And I was like, oh my God, like, but it was
Yeah.
so funny. It was so funny. It actually made me like drop the weight. But like, there's something so funny in like, in the reality of that. Like, it's very, not, I'm not saying I push everyone close to me away, but like,
No.
there's like, that joke has like real zing to it. So like, yeah, I agree with you completely.
Else, what is the funniest part of the special for you? What's the thing that gets you each time?
Oh my God, you're asking me to pick my children. You know what's so funny? I
Yeah.
always try not to laugh at my own jokes, like a pet peeve watching a comedian laugh at his own jokes. But sometimes I watch a special and I was like, oh my God, I'm really laughing there. I love the last 10, 15 minutes. I love the integrated narrative coming back around. Like that feels really, really fun and funny and interesting to me. Like I love watching all the loose ends get tied up, and I love anything that's based in like a real person, like my family. Like when I tell the Christmas story, I've told that Christmas story hundreds of times, hundreds. But like I laugh at it
Mm.
because like I know my dad. So when I'm doing my dad, I'm like, that's my dad. Or when I'm doing my brother, I'm like, that's AJ. So like that I think the bits that are based on real life. So this story is about at Christmas, and the last couple of minutes with like that wraps up the neo-Nazi meeting. Really, really fun and funny to me. But if you want me to pick one line,
Yeah, do it.
let me see if I can pick one line. Oh, I have a line where that I think sums up the meeting well, where like I'm sitting in the room and there's a guy a few seats away from me, and at some point he went, "Jews are sneaky and they're everywhere," and I was like, and like I love that moment in the show because
Yeah.
like the audience knows something that character doesn't. They see my reaction. It's a lot
Yeah.
of fun. But I'm sure you're watching this at home. You're like, that's not that funny. It's contextual. I promise
That's
you,
what's
it's
the funniest.
contextual. You have to see the
That's what's
movie.
the funniest for you, and that's that's the
Yeah, it's
funniest.
funny for me.
Yeah, that's
It's
correct.
funniest for me.
The uh, Alex, all the best of luck for the Emmy Awards,
Thank you so
especially
much.
eligible for the Emmy Awards this year. And you know what? You never know.
You never know.
You never
You never.
know.
He's quoting the special now at me.
That
You never know. You
that
never
Emmy
know.
might just.
It's been amazing to be in that conversation, and like we started this in this little shoe store behind a shoe store in London, like a pub in East London behind, and the fact that it's gone to off Broadway, and then when it went to Broadway and it's become such a gorgeous special, it's the work I'm most proud of. And so like, yeah, the fact that people are really, into this, and that it's been part of the Emmys conversation has been like the most insane honor.
Now just
And it's
picturing
just
you.
that Diana, you know.
Yeah. Now just picturing you in like a little storeroom, like with shoes and like a cobbler
It
behind
was.
you, like cobbling on the shoes and things like that.
It
Yeah.
was a show called Tiny Cupboard. It was
Yeah.
a great show called Tiny Cupboard, and they
There
had
you
it.
go.
And like, it was fantastic. A place in Shoreditch, and you just like do this thing. It was so cool.
Look,
But like to go from
yeah,
that to this has been sweet.
yeah. And people watching this interview can go to goldderby.com to follow the Emmy Awards races. And Alex, just thanks so much for the conversation today. It was great.
Not at all. These are good questions. Thanks, man.